Ladies and gentlemen, every day, life gives us opportunities to be offended. Someone cuts you off in traffic, a loved one says something careless, a coworker overlooks your effort, a friend breaks a promise. In a world where imperfection is guaranteed, the only way to live in peace is to master the principle of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a religious suggestion. It is a life law. You do not forgive because you feel like it. You forgive because you understand its power. Feelings follow decisions, not the other way around. Many people wait to feel better before they release someone, not realizing that feeling better comes after the release. Unforgiveness is not a punishment for the offender. It's a chain around the soul of the offended. Bitterness is a parasite. It eats away at your joy, your health, your vision. Every time you rehearse the pain, you reinforce the wound. But forgiveness is the scalpel that cuts away the infection without killing the heart. Let me say this to you clearly. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without poison. You may never forget what was done, but you can remember it without anger, without hate, and without being tied to it emotionally. That is freedom, and freedom is the essence of life. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, not just to the other person. Some of us are walking around with emotional debts owed to people who don't even know they hurt us or don't care. Why give them space in your mind rent-free? Release them, release yourself. The workplace is filled with unspoken offenses that breed tension. Families are torn apart by generational grudges. Communities remain divided because we pass down bitterness as inheritance. But one act of forgiveness can break cycles that therapy alone cannot fix. Why? Because forgiveness is spiritual surgery. True strength is not measured by how long you can hold a grudge. It is measured by how quickly you can let it go and move forward with purpose. When you forgive, you don't excuse the wrong. You just refuse to be controlled by it. Your vision is too important. Your peace is too precious. Your future is too powerful to be tied to your past. Forgiveness is often misunderstood because it is approached emotionally rather than fundamentally. Many people wait until they feel like forgiving, believing that forgiveness is something that should flow naturally from the heart. But the truth is, forgiveness is not driven by feelings. It is an act of the will, a principle that must be understood and applied regardless of the emotional state. Principles are unchanging truths that remain constant whether you feel them or not. Gravity doesn't ask how you feel before it pulls you down. In the same way, forgiveness doesn't require your emotions to align before you put it into practice. When you treat forgiveness as an emotion, you hand over its power to the ever-changing tides of human feeling. One moment, you might feel strong enough to let something go. The next, a memory triggers anger or pain, and you withdraw the forgiveness you once extended. This cycle keeps people bound in emotional roller coasters, unable to truly heal or move forward. But when you see forgiveness as a principle, it becomes a constant, a fixed position you return to not because it feels good, but because it is right and necessary for your personal growth. Principles govern life at every level. A farmer who understands the principle of sowing and reaping doesn't plant a seed only when he feels happy. He plants it because the soil will respond to seed, whether or not he's having a good day. Similarly, the principle of forgiveness brings results not based on your mood, but on your obedience to a law higher than your emotions. Forgiveness works when you work it. It brings peace, release, and clarity, even when your heart is still catching up with the decision. One of the deepest signs of maturity is the ability to act on principle while your emotions are still healing. Many people assume that if they still feel pain, they haven't truly forgiven, but pain and forgiveness can coexist. You can make a principled decision to forgive someone even while the wounds are still tender. Over time, that decision begins to transform your emotional state. Your feelings begin to follow your faithfulness to the principle. This is why healing often starts with a decision and not a feeling. You choose to forgive, and as you live out that choice, your emotions are renewed. It's important to understand that living by principle places you above the situation. It gives you authority over it. When you operate by principle, You are no longer a victim of what was done to you. You become a steward of your own peace. You take back the control that offense tried to steal. Offense is an emotional thief, but principle is a guardian of your inner world. The person who lives by principle doesn't wait to feel peace before acting in peace. They act in peace, and the peace follows. So many people live reactive lives because they've never learned to separate emotion from principle. They are tossed by every offense, hurt by every slight, imprisoned by every betrayal. They think they're being authentic by holding on to the pain, but authenticity without wisdom becomes self-sabotage. The person who lives from principle says, I feel the pain, but I choose the higher road. I acknowledge the hurt, but I will not be ruled by it. That person is not denying their emotions. They are disciplining them. Forgiveness as a principle gives you direction. It anchors your decisions when your heart wants revenge or silence. It reminds you that you are not just reacting to others. You are building something. You are building a character, a future, a life of peace and influence. Principles always have long-term benefits. Feelings are temporary and often deceptive. They may scream for justice, but principle points toward healing. They may demand punishment, but principle offers restoration. Principle-driven people see further, feel deeper, and live freer than those who are bound to emotional responses. Unforgiveness is not merely an emotional reaction. It is a condition that affects every part of a person's life. It does not sit still in the heart. It spreads. It roots itself in the mind, seeps into behavior, and colors perception. Many believe that holding on to a grudge is a form of power, a defense mechanism, or a way to protect themselves from being hurt again. But in reality, unforgiveness creates a prison where the offended becomes both the inmate and the warden. It restricts mental peace, distorts relationships, and holds future potential hostage to past pain. The longer it stays, the more it transforms from an isolated wound to a lifestyle of guardedness and mistrust. When someone wrongs you, the initial pain is real. There is no wisdom in pretending it isn't. But pain, when not processed through forgiveness, ferments into bitterness. That bitterness begins to shape how you speak, how you trust, how you make decisions, and how you even interpret innocent behavior from others. You start building walls to keep people out, not realizing those same walls are keeping healing from getting in. You become suspicious, overly sensitive, and emotionally exhausted from carrying yesterday into today. Forgiveness, therefore, is not for the other person. It is the key that unlocks the door to your own release. Many people spend their lives waiting for apologies that will never come. They stay locked in emotional stasis, holding themselves hostage to the behavior of someone else. And what's tragic is that sometimes the offender is gone, unavailable, or even unaware of the depth of the hurt they caused. Yet the injured party continues to live in a self-made prison, rehearsing the offense, replaying the scene, and feeling the injury as if it just happened. Unforgiveness traps a person in time. While life moves forward, they remain stuck in a moment they never released. It is impossible to walk into the future while chained to the past. You can't carry both pain and purpose in the same hands for very long. One will eventually cause you to drop the other. Freedom begins with the realization that forgiveness is not an endorsement of the wrong. It is a decision to stop letting the wrong define you. It is a powerful declaration that says, this pain is real, but it will not control my destiny. Without forgiveness, you become reactive instead of proactive. Your choices are dictated by fear, defense, and the avoidance of potential hurt. This limits creativity, kills joy, and prevents genuine connection. Relationships suffer not because of new harm, but because of old wounds left unhealed. Unforgiveness creates an internal filter that causes you to see offense even where there is none. You project old experiences onto new people, turning every encounter into a battlefield of suspicion. Unforgiveness also affects physical and mental health. Stress, anxiety, sleeplessness, and even chronic illness have been linked to emotional burdens. The body remembers what the heart refuses to release. The immune system weakens, the mind becomes fatigued, and the spirit grows dull. Emotional toxins unprocessed become physical symptoms. Yet the antidote is within reach. The choice to forgive is the beginning of emotional detox. It does not erase memory, but it rewrites how the memory affects you. It no longer hijacks your peace or shapes your identity. Forgiveness gives you your name back. It allows you to be more than what happened to you. People who live in unforgiveness often find themselves rehearsing pain in search of validation. They want someone to acknowledge the wrong so they can justify the weight they carry. But even if validation comes, it does not substitute for release. The only real way to be free is to put down the weight. That choice is yours and yours alone. Forgiveness is not about weakness. It is the ultimate act of power. It is saying, you no longer control me. I choose my freedom over my frustration. Holding on may feel strong in the moment, but it is draining over time. Releasing may feel vulnerable, but it is lie. Giving in the end clarity is one of the most undervalued results of forgiveness. When the heart is burdened by unresolved offense, the mind becomes clouded. It is difficult to see people clearly, to judge situations fairly, or to respond wisely when you are looking through the filter of pain. Unforgiveness acts like fog on the lens of your perception. It doesn't just distort your view of the person who hurt you. It distorts your view of everything. Decisions become cautious rather than courageous. Relationships feel heavy rather than life-giving, and your sense of direction in life can start to drift. The human soul was not designed to carry the weight of offense for long periods of time. Eventually, the burden of bitterness becomes too heavy, and it slows down your mental, emotional, and even spiritual progress. When you forgive, something shifts internally. There is a release not just of the offender, but of the tension that has kept your heart clenched. You start to breathe differently. Ideas begin to flow that were previously blocked by resentment. Forgiveness opens the valve of inner creativity because it frees up the emotional energy that was being used to maintain pain. Many people struggle to be productive not because they lack skill or opportunity, but because they are emotionally entangled with unresolved hurt. Their thoughts are preoccupied, their focus is fragmented. Every time they try to move forward, they are pulled back by what they refuse to let go of. Forgiveness clears the emotional debris so that you can walk forward, unburden. The clarity that comes with forgiveness also reveals truth about yourself. Sometimes we think we're angry with someone else, when in fact we are disappointed in ourselves for allowing something to happen. Forgiveness helps separate the offense from your identity. You begin to realize that what was done to you does not define who you are. You are not your betrayal. You are not your disappointment. You are not your failure. Forgiveness allows you to reclaim the narrative of your life. You are no longer stuck in the chapter of pain. You begin writing the chapter of peace in everyday life. People underestimate the cost of carrying offense. It shows up in short tempers, in sarcasm, in social withdrawal, and even in perfectionism. People try to control their environments to avoid being hurt again, not realizing they are building emotional prisons. Forgiveness breaks that pattern. It brings a fresh perspective to old pain. It tells the truth about what happened, but it also offers a new conclusion. Instead of being the victim of your history, you become the architect of your healing. That shift in clarity is priceless. Even relationships that are meant to be sources of joy can become tense when forgiveness is absent. In marriages, families, workplaces, and friendships, small offenses accumulate over time and block intimacy. When left unaddressed, those offenses begin to harden into silent resentments. Communication suffers. Trust diminishes, but forgiveness opens the door to real connection. It clears the air, resets the tone, and makes room for love to flourish again. Clarity returns when offense is removed. You can see people for who they are, not just for what they did. Forgiveness also restores clarity about purpose. Many people lose sight of their goals and passions because they are emotionally exhausted from carrying pain. They lose the energy to dream. They shrink their ambitions to match the size of their wounds. But when you forgive, you make room for vision to re-emerge. You remember why you started. You remember what really matters. You get back in touch with the core of who you are, not just the shell of who you've become through disappointment. Forgiveness lifts the fog so purpose can shine through again. There is a level of clarity that can only be accessed through healing. It cannot be taught in a classroom or gained through advice. It is the clarity that comes when your heart is no longer weighed down. When your inner world is clean, your outer world starts to align. You attract peace. You speak with more grace. You listen with more patience. Forgiveness clears the inner mirror so you can see yourself and others with accuracy and compassion. Life is full of interactions, at home, at work, on the street, and in the quiet corners of our own hearts. In every environment where people exist, so does the possibility of offense. Human imperfection guarantees that even the most well-meaning individuals will sometimes disappoint, misunderstand, or hurt each other. It may be unintentional, it may be careless, or it may be deeply personal, but the reality remains the same. Everyday life gives us daily opportunities to forgive. Forgiveness is not reserved for major betrayals or life-altering wrongs. It is a daily discipline, a mental and emotional posture that must be constantly practiced in the small moments that shape our lives in homes. Forgiveness often begins in the form of patience. A spouse's sharp word, a child's defiance, a parent's neglect, or a sibling's inconsideration. All of these things can create tiny fractures in the family structure. Left alone, these small cracks can turn into gaping wounds. But forgiveness works like emotional glue. It prevents the breakdown before it becomes irreversible. It stops anger from becoming bitterness. It stops irritation from turning into alienation. Families that thrive are not perfect. They are simply good at forgiving each other quickly and often. They don't ignore hurt. They address it, release it, and move forward. The strength of a home is built on the willingness of its members to practice forgiveness, even when they feel justified in holding on to the offense in the workplace. The need for forgiveness is no less important. Colleagues compete, managers misunderstand, teams miscommunicate. Expectations are not always met, and credit is not always given where it's due. In such environments, resentment can build quickly, creating silent walls between people who are supposed to collaborate. Productivity suffers not because of skill gaps, but because of emotional tension that no one wants to name. Yet when forgiveness is introduced, a shift occurs. People begin to talk instead of assume. They start to listen with intent, not just to respond but to understand. Forgiveness restores the relational flow that keeps organizations healthy, and effective forgiveness is also necessary in casual interactions. The barrister who was rude, the driver who cut you off, the friend who forgot to reply, the neighbor who disrespected your space. These moments seem small, but they reveal what lives inside of us. Some people carry a short fuse not because of one offense, but because they have collected hundreds of small offenses and never learned to release them. Forgiveness in everyday life prevents the soul from becoming a storage unit for unresolved frustrations. It is emotional hygiene. It is the process of clearing the debris so the heart stays clean and the mind stays free. Most importantly, forgiveness is something we must extend to ourselves on a daily basis. People make mistakes. They say the wrong thing. They act out of fear, pride, or insecurity. And when they do, they often carry guilt long after the moment has passed. Self-forgiveness is essential because it teaches us how to grow without shame. It allows us to learn from our errors instead of being defined by them. A person who cannot forgive themselves will struggle to forgive others. Because they view life through the lens of condemnation instead of grace. Everyday life doesn't just give us chances to be offended. It gives us chances to grow. Each moment of offense is also a moment of decision. Do we hold on or do we let go? Do we demand payment or do we extend mercy? Forgiveness is not weakness in these moments, it is wisdom. It recognizes that the cost of keeping the offense is greater than the cost of releasing it. The daily act of forgiving doesn't mean you lower your standards or accept mistreatment. It means you protect your peace, prioritize your purpose, and choose love over resentment, even when it's difficult. Forgiveness in everyday life is not a one-time act. It is a rhythm, a lifestyle, a mindset that says no matter how many times I'm given the opportunity to carry offense, I will choose to release it because peace is too valuable to trade for pride. Strength is often misunderstood. It is typically portrayed as the ability to dominate, to defend, to outlast, or to retaliate. But true strength is more subtle, more disciplined, and more inward than that. Forgiveness, though often dismissed as passive or weak, is in fact one of the highest demonstrations of personal power. It takes great strength to absorb offense and still choose peace. It takes maturity to hold the power to retaliate and yet decide to release. The instinct to fight back is natural, but the ability to let go is supernatural. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is mastery over one's emotions, thoughts, and ego. To forgive someone is to exercise dominion over your own inner world. It requires you to rise above your instinct for revenge, to see beyond the temporary satisfaction of holding a grudge, and to embrace a long-term vision of healing and wholeness. Anyone can react emotionally. That takes no training, no insight, and no maturity, but to respond with wisdom, with composure, and with intentionality, that is strength. Forgiveness reveals who is in control of the inner space. It proves that you are not a servant to your anger or a victim to your pain. You are the steward of your peace. The act of forgiving is not always visible. It doesn't involve shouting, dramatic confrontations, or declarations. Most often it is quiet. It happens in the private chambers of the heart, in moments when no one else is watching. And yet, its impact is profound. When a person chooses to forgive, they set in motion a process of healing that ripples far beyond the original offense. They model integrity, they cultivate emotional intelligence, and they become a safe space in a world filled with judgment and retaliation. Forgiveness is not just about releasing the other person. It's about proving to yourself that your character is stronger than your pain. Many people think that holding on to an offense makes them strong. They feel a sense of control when they refuse to forgive. They interpret their silence as power, their bitterness as armor. But the longer resentment is held, the more it poisons the person carrying it. Strength is not the ability to carry pain, it is the wisdom to release it before it takes root. Forgiveness is not surrender, it is strategy. It is how strong people remain free. They do not waste their energy on emotional debt. They do not allow the behavior of others to dictate their internal state. They choose to invest in peace because they know that energy spent on anger is energy lost from purpose. Forgiveness also reflects deep self-awareness. A strong person understands their own capacity for error, for failure, for causing unintentional hurt. They recognize that the same grace they extend to others is the grace they will one day need. This awareness creates humility, and humility fuels strength. The strong are not those who pretend to be unshakable, but those who know how to recover quickly from offense. They don't carry unnecessary baggage. They travel light because their focus is too sharp, their vision too clear, and their time too precious to be wasted on wounds that could be healed in everyday life. The strongest people are not always the loudest or the most dominant. They are often the most centered, the most grounded, and the most forgiving. They walk into tense situations and bring calm. They hear offensive words and respond with clarity instead of chaos. They have learned the art of restraint, the power of patience, and the security that comes from knowing who they are. Forgiveness is not just something they do, it is part of who they are. It flows from a place of inner fullness, not from emotional deficit. Choosing to forgive is a sign that you value your peace more than your pride. It shows that you have nothing to prove and nothing to protect. You are not reacting out of weakness, but leading from a place of power. The power to heal, the power to rise, The power to love in a world that often chooses to hate is the highest expression of strength a person can live by. Forgiveness does not only affect the one who gives it, it has a powerful impact on those who witness it. In every act of genuine forgiveness there is a message being preached, not with words but with actions. It is a quiet but undeniable declaration that healing is possible, that peace is within reach, and that love is stronger than offense. When someone forgives deeply and honestly, it creates a ripple effect in the environment. It shifts the emotional climate. It challenges others to reflect, to reconsider, and sometimes to reconcile. Forgiveness is not just a personal virtue. It is a public testimony. People watch how others handle pain. They notice whether bitterness takes root or if grace rises to the surface. In homes, children learn how to navigate conflict by observing how their parents forgive or hold grudges. In workplaces, team dynamics are shaped by how leaders and peers handle offense and restore broken trust. In communities, healing begins not when people are perfect, but when they choose to forgive in the face of imperfection. Forgiveness becomes a living example, showing others that offense does not have to be the end of the relationship or the final chapter of the story. When you choose to forgive, you show others that restoration is possible even after real hurt. You become a living signpost pointing toward emotional maturity, humility, and strength. You may never know how many people are inspired by your ability to move forward without carrying resentment. Sometimes your forgiveness helps someone else believe they can do the same. Your decision to forgive becomes the evidence that bitterness is not the only option, that anger is not the only response, and that healing is not just an idea. It's a choice that can be made daily. Forgiveness invites others into freedom. People who live around unforgiveness often feel tense, unsafe, and emotionally cautious. They walk on eggshells, fearful of triggering unresolved pain, but forgiveness opens the atmosphere. It creates a space where honesty can breathe and where vulnerability is not punished but welcomed. Forgiving people become safe people. They are trusted not because they are perfect, but because they have demonstrated that grace can govern their responses. This safety empowers others to be authentic, to admit their faults, and to take ownership without the fear of being condemned or endlessly punished. In leadership, forgiveness is a mark of emotional authority. Leaders who forgive are not easily offended, and they do not lead from wounds. They correct, but they do not crush. They confront, but they do not condemn. Their ability to forgive builds loyalty, respect, and relational equity. It tells their followers that mistakes are not the end of opportunity, and that growth is valued more than perfection. A leader who models forgiveness creates a culture where people are not paralyzed by fear, but energized by the freedom to fail forward. This kind of culture is rare, but it is always the fruit of forgiveness, even in spiritual and moral influence. Forgiveness carries weight. People are not just moved by eloquence or ideas. They are moved by compassion and by real examples of love in action. Forgiveness reflects the highest standards of character. It proves that what you believe has penetrated how you behave. It bridges the gap between principle and practice. It is one thing to teach forgiveness. It is another to live it when the offense is fresh, when the wound is deep, and when no apology has been offered. That kind of forgiveness carries authority. It commands respect and inspires transformation. Your act of forgiveness may not make headlines, but it leaves a mark. It plants seeds in the hearts of those who are watching. Seeds of hope, seeds of grace, seeds of courage. People may not say it, but many are silently impacted when they witness someone rise above pain and choose peace. They begin to imagine what it would feel like to live without the weight of their own grudges. Your example becomes their invitation. Your freedom becomes their motivation. Your peace becomes their possibility. Forgiveness, then, is never just for you. It is a light for others to follow. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a lifestyle, a decision made again and again in the quiet places of the heart. It is not a feeling, but a choice. Not a retreat, but an advance. It is the doorway through which healing walks, and the key that unlocks peace, clarity, and strength. In a world where offense is common and pain is unavoidable, forgiveness stands as a revolutionary act. It empowers you to reclaim your joy, to restore broken connections, and to lead by example. When you choose to forgive, you are not just changing your life. You are creating a ripple that can change the world around you. True power is not found in holding on to what hurt you, but in releasing it so that what's ahead of you is no longer held hostage by what's behind. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is wisdom, strength, freedom, and above all, it is love in its highest form.